Good morning, everyone. It's so great to see you. You actually made it this morning after the amazing dance party yesterday. I saw a few of you dancing. I'm surprised people didn't come up here and join the. No, I know why you didn't, but but it's great to see you here. My name's Roy Steiner. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Rockefeller Foundation, and I'm really excited to be on this panel because yesterday we reinforced the fact that we can change this food system there, and we know how to do it and what to do it. But the question is always, what specifically is going to lead to the system change that we all want? And today in this panel, we're going to be talking about these levers of change that are so critical. Institutional procurement, whether that's school meals or governments, really have potential for profound impact. And when you look at it, it's a minimum hundreds of billions, potentially over $1 trillion worth of funding that goes through these channels. How do we use that flow to change the system? That's what we're going to talk about. And I am so pleased to have amazing panelists with me. Marina Lima, who is not from Peru, but from Brazil. She's Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Agrarian and Development. And really
family farming.
And family farming, which is a really unique ministry. I don't know of any other ministry that really is set up that way. And Brazil, as you know, is an amazing example for school meals and the transformation that's happened there. We also have Anna Jönsson, who is the strategy lead for food for the city of Copenhagen. And I know they have been at the lead of so many new innovations, so excited to hear from Anna. And then Vijay Jakhar, who is the head of the Farmer Forum for India, represents hundreds of thousands of farmers, and I think has a unique perspective from the world's largest democracy and actually the largest public procurement system in the world. So very excited. Let me just start off then with the first question is, why is institutional procurement such a powerful lever? And I'll start with you, Vijay.
Thank you. At the onset, I'd want to say that farmers don't grow out of choice. Farmers grow interpreting market signals, government policies, which include procurement, and that's why procurement is so important because it drives what farmers grow and how they grow it. As a farmer, I understand that all compromises are not perfect. There are imperfections. But I'd want to state here on this stage that do not treat farmers just as providers of food. We also want to make a dignified livelihood out of our profession. And the economics of affordable food is resulting in low farm gate prices. It does not have to be. There's work on true cost of food, and that's what we should also be focusing on.
Thanks, Vijay. Anna, why is institutional procurement such a powerful lever?
Yes, thank you for having me. And I think from our a bit different perspective, being a small city in compared to in India and Brazil, in Copenhagen, I think for us it's just very clear what we can do with our procurement. 25 years ago, we set a very ambitious target for organic public procurement. At then it was 75% procurement was our ambitious target, and we reached that goal in only a few years' time. And now we are very proud to say that our procurement is almost 90% organic, and it just shows what you can do when you set some ambitions and invest in transforming the way that you buy and serve food.
Right, thank you. Marina, I know in Brazil that it has one of those amazing policies that where 30% of school food has to come from family farms. If you could share a little bit about how that has transformed. And you've been there from the very beginning. This started in 2009. And so Marina has literally helped create this program that everybody is trying to emulate in many, many countries. So Marina, maybe if you can share a bit.
Thank you, Roy. It's an honor for us in Brazil to share this experience with public procurement policies, particularly because there is a connection between school feeding and family farming. Brazil was pioneer in linking school meals to family farming, inside the National School Feeding Program established in 2009. And this last week, we just amended the law to increase this percentage from 30 to 45% of purchase from family farming. It was a victory for the family farmers. And we are speaking of the largest school feeding program in the world, benefiting more than 40 million students, serving 50 million meals per day in 150,000 schools. This encounter between family farm and school feeding brought about a really revolution. On the production side, it opens up a significant market for family farmers, generate income in rural areas and stimulating local economies. The program promotes income generation, productive inclusion, and diversification of production in rural territories. On the side of consumption, it provides a more diverse supply of food, guarantee health and culturally appropriate meals in school, and includes local food sourced from Brazil's social biodiversity. The program fosters healthy eating habits from childhood and strengthens food and nutrition education in schools. So, furthermore, the program's guideline established priority for purchases from indigenous people, Afro-descendant communities, agrarian reform settlers, and rural women. This was really important because it helped to address historical inequalities in access to market and strengthen the product inclusion of these groups. So, and another incentive of this program is to buy from organic production and social biodiversity products, as well as prioritizing local suppliers. So, in addition to address inequality and ensuring children's food and nutritional security, another concrete outcome of the program is the reduction of environmental footprint by prioritizing short supply chains and local production. So Brazil experience, Roy, demonstrate that well-designed public policy implemented with strategic vision have the power to transform realities, connecting rural and urban areas, production with consumption, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability.
Thanks, Marina. It's actually quite amazing. I was in Fortaleza, Brazil, actually 2 weeks ago for the Food System Summit, a school meal summit there. And we went to visit one of the schools in Brazil. And I actually sat down, and there's this beautiful plate of this delicious, fresh food from the local market. And I literally wanted to cry because I had just was in a U.S. school, and they had served, their meal was a pack of Doritos. They had cut it and poured hamburger helper meat on top, and that was the school meal. And then they also had Domino's pizza for Friday lunch. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what a difference that is. And Brazil has just actually outlawed ultra-processed food in schools. Yeah. Right? I mean, what an amazing, amazing thing. I mean, you really direct a food system when you do that. Talking about directing food systems, Anna, if you can share a little bit about how Copenhagen is using these procurement policies to shift to more equitable and sustainable sourcing.
So yes, as I mentioned, we've worked with strategic sustainable food policies for over 25 years now in Copenhagen. It started off with the organic target, and then gradually we sort of developed that whole perception of what food can be and what public food can be. So I think with that ambition, we also started a movement of changing the way that we prepare and serve public meals, starting with our children's institutions, so in daycare institutions, moving on to school meals, and that's also to mention that school meals is not something we've always had in Copenhagen. It's a relatively new thing, and it's also something that we're quite unique with in a Danish context. But moving over for the children's institutions also to include social services and nursing homes. So it's really this broad take on all public meals matter, and also the fact that when you work with sustainability, that goes from, you know, where the meal is sourced, how it's produced, where you buy it from, how you prepare it, and also how you serve it, and the whole context of the meal. So gathering people together in the institutions to eat. So for us, it's really a holistic perspective where you look at sustainability, health, community, food literacy, and so on. And I think it all started with this organic ambition. So it used to be more of like environmental targets, but it turned out to be more of a welfare targets and a whole, you know, improving the livelihoods and the lives of the people who come and eat in our institutions. So there's so much potential there. But I think also something that's been hugely important for us in Copenhagen is that we have investment, so we have fixed funding from our politicians to implement these goals. So we've had the goal of organic procurement for many years, and with our current food strategy, that is expiring this year, but 2019 we approved a target to reduce emissions from public procurement by 25% in 2025, and we'd actually exceeded that goal. So only in 4 or 5 years' time, we managed to reduce our emissions by 32% across our institutions, which is huge for us. Really, even, you know, seeing that it doesn't take so much to actually change the way that we cook and serve meals. It takes, you know, dedication, and it takes also capacity building in our kitchens. So we have a capacity building program where we train our kitchens. We have around 1,000 public kitchens in Copenhagen, and how to prepare and serve these meals for the different target groups that we're working with. So it's really it's a very like holistic as well, and also really well made policy that cuts across the different areas that really matter when it comes to food and what you buy and how you serve it, really.
Right. I know you described yourself as a small city, but it's actually a very influential city. One of my program officers just went to a workshop in Copenhagen. New York City serves 1 million children every day, but is actually inspired by a lot of the things you're doing, and now offers vegetarian options at every meal. There's a lot of and it's so fascinating when you get the cities together, they start sharing ideas and innovation, and people start seeing possibilities, and that's the power of this cities network that you've been part of. Vijay, you come from a country that has the largest public distribution system in the world. I think it's 800 million people. Like that scale. How can we use that, and how can we use public procurement to improve smallholder farmer livelihoods?
So in my country, in India, to provide free of cost food to 800 million people, that's 60% of India's population. The government of India procures wheat and rice, which incentivizes and compels farmers to grow these crops. And that's why we were talking about why procurement is important. Yeah. And what is important in every procurement program, lest that procurement program, instead of becoming a Trojan horse, burns the cities down, is how do we design the fine print, how do we implement those procurement programs? So what we've been, as a farmers organization, suggesting to the government is to halve the number of beneficiaries and to use the savings to procure not cereals, not grains, but to use it for oilseed, pulses, and millets, and then distribute that to the poorer beneficiaries. So it improves nutrition, health of the poorest people, and it also helps rejuvenation of soils, biodiversity, and it helps with crop rotation, and it helps with lots of other things. So the key thing is not just the procurement, it's also how those programs are designed, and they will differ from place to place, from New York to Brazil to India. Some have larger urban populations, some have more rural populations. So we can go into that detail later.
So I was talking with Vijay. As many of you know, the Rockefeller Foundation was one of the funders of the green revolution. And at the time, it seemed like a really good idea. What were the unintended consequences of that is it really pushed towards a lot of...
I think Green Revolution was a fantastic idea, but as more information became available, as knowledge progressed, we should have evolved with the times.
Absolutely.
And when you continue with that same program for decades upon decades, then it becomes a burden on the society and on the planet.
And one of the things that it did, which was unintended, it shifted so much of the agriculture towards these cereals, and the pulses were not, kind of dropped out. And without pulses in the environment, you don't get the nitrogen fixation, you don't have the right sorts of things. So public procurement and these new technologies are very important to think and adjust over time, and that didn't happen, right? So now we can do that. So going back, when you were thinking about Brazil, what are some of the examples you would potentially leverage, either Anna or Ajay?
Let me just continue and say that I think, just as we document success stories and we tell success stories, it's absolutely important to document learnings from failures. If we don't document failures, we'll never know where we failed. And it's possible a program failed in one country because of its particular circumstances, but it may succeed in other continents and other regions within the same country. So it's important to document failures. And this message goes out to all the donors and multilateral agencies here. Don't just document success stories. And similarly, when we focus on procurement, I think we should also focus on the process of procurement. Who are we procuring those goods from? Because this does not normally come out in a conversation. I think we need to prioritize farmer groups, cooperatives to procure from. We need to ensure that cities have farmer markets in every locality where farmers can get their produce and sell directly every morning fresh fruits and vegetables to those people in localities. We need to make sure that in rural settings, in urban fringes, you have kitchen gardens, poultry, backyard poultry, and the midday meal schemes, school programs, procure locally from those programs. For example, if you were to give 1 or 2 eggs a week to a student in school, or to give a glass of milk, depending on which country and continent you are, you could either procure it from corporations, or you could procure it from backyard poultry, or you could procure it from small dairies like we have in India. So I think it's just not the procurement, it's even the process of procurement that will make the program succeed or fail.
Yeah, and I think that's a point you were making too, Anna, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's really interesting also hearing what you can do in Brazil with these policies and supporting small-scale farmers. And I think for us in Denmark, of course, working in a different context, I don't believe that our decision makers really have this perception yet of why we need to really rethink the way that we buy food. And this example now that's being used a lot in Denmark is the fact that our fruit and vegetable production is really at a record low, and it's almost as at risk of extinction. Yeah. And you think that's crazy. We have a huge animal production in Denmark, and when looking at our own procurement as a city, what we buy that is Danish produced, I think around 90% of what we procure of animal-based foods are Danish, but from the vegetables and the plant-based products, it's really low. So I don't have the exact numbers, but I think it's about a fourth or even less. And there's so much potential there, and there's so much we could do in trying to also support what food system we want to have in the future in Denmark and in our sort of local region. So we really need to focus on how can we actually support that. How can we bring in locally produced Danish apples in season rather than buying apples from sometimes South Africa? And that is really something we need to focus more on. And it's interesting to hear about these examples from Brazil and what you've been doing there. And I think the whole way that we see it also in Denmark is we don't have the same maybe equity concerns when it comes to the producers as you have, so you're really linking that with the equity concerns with the school foods, and we really need to start focusing more on those types of aspects in Denmark as well, I think, and maybe in the EU as a whole.
And getting procurement policies that actually make sense is not as easy as you would think. In New York State, they have what's called, and many states have this in countries, it's the lowest cost supplier gets the contract. Well, so if a Chinese apple is 1 cent cheaper than a New York State apple, you have to buy the Chinese apple, which makes no sense. New York State is well known for apple. It's, you know, New York City is the big apple, right? There's a reason why apples are very, but it doesn't, they don't take into account the true cost, the true value, all the other additional value that gets created by local procurement, etc. We need to change policies to do that. And I think you're starting to do that. The other thing, I was just actually in Copenhagen 3 days ago and had the most delicious brown, that dark, heavy bread. Like I'm sure everybody has had that. I mean, it's so delicious. What you don't know is that I think it was about 15 years ago, whole grain consumption in Denmark was only about 10%. 90% was refined grains. And over a 10-year period, you moved from 10% to 80% whole grain. And fiber is probably the most consumed nutrient worldwide. So moving from refined grains to whole grain is a very powerful thing that Denmark has shown. It's totally possible to do. And we're trying to do that in schools now. What's interesting is, you know, refined grain, when you refine grain, you lose 20 to 30% of the volume and 90% of the nutrition. And that made sense 30 years ago because of shelf life. Refined grain would last 6 to 12 months, whole grain only about 4 weeks. Now we have milling technology, you can expand whole grain to 6 months plus. So we used to refine grain for a reason that no longer makes any sense. And we're taking out, how do you shift back? Schools and institutional procurement is a powerful way to start doing that. Marina, any of the closing thoughts? What comes to mind as you think about the advice you would give to others?
The public procurement has enormous potential to drive systemic transformation because it mobilizes significant resource and guides the way food is produced, distributed, and consumed. The purchases act as a real lever to accelerate the agroecological transformation by guaranteeing markets for producers already working with sustainable and encourage another to migrate to this model. So at the same time, it is important to have another public policies to improve the production. In Brazil, we did some kind of public policy as access to land, credit, technical assistance, minimum price guarantee, and that create a structural condition for the systemic shift. So, and to overcome some barriers of implementing this model, like bureaucracy, the complexity of procurement process, the need to engage key actors, and the challenge of ensuring coordination across sectors and level of governments. To overcome these barriers, we innovate with procurement exemptions and simplifying process for farmers. We organized also joint training sections with farmers, nutritionists, school managers, and rural extensions agents. And the most important, we create permanent dialogue space between government and civil society. It was with this collective construction where we put together different words, education and agriculture, that and supported by a clear legal framework that enable Brazil to consolidate this largest program. So, but in conclusion, Brazil's case showed that public procurement can concretely connect health, education, sustainability, and rural development. More than Trojan horse, it becomes a true engine of systemic transformation, one that can inspire other cities and countries with the power of state procurement to guarantee healthier and more sustainable food for future.
Thank you, Marina. Great. So, final reflections, Anna and Ajay, on how do we use procurement as a good Trojan horse that actually leads to victory rather than burns down the city. Anna.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why it needs to be called the Trojan horse, because I think it's so clear that it has all this potential, and I guess it depends on how you frame it. But I think your whole grain, the example that you had there, on when you focus on what, on certain types of products that we should buy and use more. For us, we work a lot with data in our procurement, and having that overview and transparency of what we buy and why we buy it and how we buy it and so on. And I think this is something that we're going to work more towards in the future. We're looking into monitoring more closely what we buy and how it fluctuates with the national dietary guidelines to make sure that nutrition is in place in all our different types of institutions. And I think that is something that we know, for example, we need to buy more fish, we need to buy more seeds, we need to start building awareness of, what is nutritional meals, what are good, tasty, healthy meals throughout our kitchens, and hopefully have that also that knowledge and understanding of good food to spread also to to the people who eat it. They can take it home and they can start interacting with their families about that. So I think maybe making it a little bit more evident what it is that we eat and why we eat it. And I think public meals and procurement is a really, really good place to start there.
Thanks. And final words, Ajay.
I'm really thankful that the Eat Lancet Commission 2.0 had the voice of the farmers, and it spoke and the report talks about it. And I'm talking about justice. I'll use this opportunity to speak on behalf of farmers that there's an elephant sitting in the room in Washington, and it's forcing, and it's serious matter, and it's forcing countries to buy subsidized American produce. Now, what that does is that it when you're forced to buy subsidized produce coming out of America, it forces down farm gate prices for countries across Europe, Africa, and Asia. It drives farmers into poverty. And poor farmers will never transform practices to be transformative to meet the planetary boundaries. And that's a problem we have. John Rockstrom yesterday very rightly said that justice sits at the heart of the food systems. I, as a farmer, want to add that WTO in its present form does not do justice to farmers in the global south and the developing world.
Great. And on that note, thank you so much. We will end our panel, and thank you so much, panelists, for that. And we will move on. Thank you.